We're just a couple of days away from week 0, and I think that you can feel that football is in the air. I can feel that football is in the air. Georgia's off this week, right? We got Iowa State versus Kansas State out in Ireland, Stanford, Hawaii. Georgia plays the following week. Now that we're a little bit closer, I feel like we know more about Georgia, as much as you kind of can know heading into a season, especially a season with as much transition as it has for Georgia. A lot of new players are going to be contributors for this football team that weren't in the past. A lot of guys in the NFL portal, all of that. Let's do some record predictions. I'm going to go through Georgia's record, talk about kind of, in my eyes, are they more likely to win this game, lose this game? Let's talk about their ceiling and their floor from a record standpoint in the regular season. So, what's their floor? Is it 5-7? Far too low for me. Is their ceiling 12-0? Find out. Stick with me to find that out. Newsletters down below. I'm Ryan Curley. Welcome in to Dawg Post. Best way to stay up to date with the Dogs and with Dawg Post is with the free newsletter that I've got a QR code. It's going to go be at the bottom of the video every once in a while. Take a picture of it or screenshot to access that. The newsletter is great. We pushed out Final Feelings today. A lot of Dawg Post things are back because football is back, baby. All right, so they open it up with Marshall. Then they've got, just to quickly run through it, opening up the season with Marshall, and then Austin, PA, at Tennessee, against Bama, home against Kentucky, at Auburn, home against Ole Miss, neutral site against Florida, at Mississippi State, Texas at home, Charlotte at home, and then the neutral site at Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Georgia Tech. You run through that schedule, and is it daunting? I think daunting is a stretch. I do think that this team is better. The schedule is better for it because you flip the SEC schedule around. Georgia's road SEC schedule was extremely challenging a year ago when you had to go to Ole Miss and Bama and Texas, and they end up losing 2 out of those 3 games. This year, they've got 2 challenging road games, right? They've got to go to Knoxville, and they've got to go to Auburn, which is going to end up being a night kickoff in that Auburn game. Cam Newton's jersey apparently is going to get retired that night. So there's going to be a lot going on in Jordan-Hare Stadium. I don't know why we're pronouncing it Jordan, but that's how they pronounce it. So, easier, right? Easier schedule. They go 10-2 last year. 10-2 was good enough to get them into the SEC championship game. There's a chance 10-2 is good enough to get them into the SEC championship game this season as well. But let's start, picking this apart. What's Georgia's ceiling? What's Georgia's floor? Let's start with the floor. So you run through it. Marshall's a win. Austin Peay's a win. Charlotte's a win. That's 3 wins right there. I'm shocked if Mississippi State's not a win. That's 4 wins right there. Shocked if they lose to Kentucky at home. That's 5 wins right there. I have a hard time seeing them lose to Ole Miss at home. That's 6 wins right there. I think that they beat Georgia Tech. That's 7 right there. And then it gets a little bit more complicated because you got to go to Knox. The games I've left out are their 5 toughest, right? Florida, Auburn, Texas, Alabama, and Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Texas, and Alabama. Absolute floor is 7-5. But the way that I would put it is probably 8-4. If this team just turns out to not be good, if Gunnar Stockton is not good, the offensive line isn't good, there's just another few elements where, hey, look, they just downgraded from last year, which I have a hard time seeing, then I think your floor is that 8-4 mark. They probably, how does that happen? What would have to happen for them to go 8-4? Probably lose at Auburn and probably lose at Tennessee. That would be your possibility there. So that's 2 losses, and then get overpowered by Texas at home and potentially by Alabama at home, or that Florida game doesn't go the way they want it to. I would say 8-4 is the worst that this Georgia team does. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Georgia's going to be better than 8-4. When I look at this schedule and I say, what if the Dogs, which apparently you guys want me to add a lot more Southern twang to that, it really slows me down. But Dogs, oh man, that's not good. Don't clip that. But when I look at this, they're going to be better than that. bare minimum 8-4. If the team just doesn't improve, if this wide receiver room isn't what people are saying and insiders are saying, which people feel has far improved, if the defense that lost Jalen Walker and Malachi Starks and Michael Williams and a lot of production doesn't replace that production in an effective way, if all of the things that we think are going to get better just don't, and this team is just a little bit worse than last year, then it certainly can go 8-4 and lose in hostile environments on the road and lose against really talented teams at home. It's in the realm of possibility. I'm not predicting that to happen. What I think is that this team goes, to be quite honest with you, I think they go 11-1 or 12-0. Ryan, are you just being a homer? You cover Georgia, this and that. Is it about that? No. Here's why. They are at home against two of their two toughest opponents they are playing at home, Alabama and Texas. Those are going to be night games. Those are going to be hostile environments. Georgia hasn't lost at home since that 2019 South Carolina game. I don't think they lose at home this season. I just don't. I think what's most likely, if they're going to lose a game, is they lose on the road at Tennessee or at Auburn or that neutral site game against Florida. I have a hard time seeing Georgia lose at home. I have a hard time seeing them lose to Georgia Tech this season as well. So when I run through it, again, I think they beat Marshall. I think they beat Austin Peay. I think they beat Tennessee. Tennessee, I think, will have a harder time replacing its talent than Georgia will. They're going through a lot of transition. Maybe at the end of the day, maybe Nico Iamaleava was bad for Tennessee, and maybe he was holding them back. And Joey Aguilar, or whoever ends up winning that job, because apparently it's still up for grabs, ends up being better. But they lost the engine of their offense in Dylan Sampson. They lost their top-end talent on defense. I like the young talent that they have at receiver. I like the talent that they have in the defensive back room, but I don't love the rest of it. And that's just me. And look, I don't sit here and break down X's and O's. That's not me. I think it'd be a little disingenuous of me to sit here and try to break down tape or film, but I watch a lot of football and I have a good sense of talent, is what I would say. And typically a really good feel for what's about to happen in these games. I'd be a little surprised if Georgia goes into Knoxville and loses, but that's not impossible. So they start off with 3 wins, and then they play Alabama. I think they win that game, like I said before. I think they beat Kentucky home, like I said before. At Auburn at night is tricky. Is Jackson Arnold their guy? Is he going to change things for Hugh Freeze in this offense? They think it's going to be an improved offense. Anything can happen in that stadium. And that's why I kind of point to that game as being the most likely that they lose, even though Auburn's not the best opponent that they will play this season. I just think it's one of those things where you've seen plenty of games in that stadium. You see plenty of night games in that stadium. Crazy stuff happens, and crazy stuff has happened to Georgia in that stadium, not just in general, but it's happened in Georgia. I think they beat Ole Miss at home. I think Florida will be tough if DJ Lagway is what people think he is, dealing with some injuries here in preseason. But that Florida roster certainly is a little bit better than it was a year ago from a talent standpoint. And I am a believer in DJ Lagway. I think he's a very talented quarterback. I think he's going to be a really fun player to watch over the next couple of years in college football. Certainly a future pro prospect. At Mississippi State, Georgia's winning that game. Texas at home. Is that the game of the year, or is it the Bama game at home? Which one's the game of the year? Can they have 2 games of the year? The way that Georgia's defense handled Texas' offense a year ago would be concerning to me if I was a Longhorn fan and if I was someone for Texas. Does this offense get better with Arch Manning? I think it's certainly possible, especially with his mobility. And Georgia typically struggles with mobile quarterbacks, but it's going to be a tough ask for them to go on the road to Sanford and pull that off. I know that Georgia pulled it off a year ago, so it's not impossible, right? But that's going to be a tough ask. They beat Charlotte. They beat Georgia Tech. I don't really have any doubt about that. But I think that when you look at this, 8-4 to 12-0 is their range. It's going to be somewhere in there. I would bet on 11-1. If I was placing money and you had to make a bet for what the prediction for what the record's going to be, my money would be put on they are going to go 11-1. I think they drop a game. I just think it's tough in college football, but they go undefeated. I'm not going to be surprised. And the funny part about that is when we get week to week, we're going to have to feel it out, and I'm going to have to make my predictions week to week. I may think that they go undefeated when I look at it from a week-to-week standpoint. But when you look at it from a more 10,000-foot view, look, this is a tough sport. They don't have as much talent as they did in the past. Dropping a game is pretty reasonable. And look, Ohio State dropped 2 games and ended up winning the national championship last year, so it's okay to do that. 8-4 to 12-0. That's the floor and the ceiling, if you ask me. Although I think the worst they really do is 9-3, and I think they go 11-1. Record prediction. Y'all asked for it. I delivered. Appreciate you watching. Newsletter is below.